Welcome to part 2 of my chat with Laura Hindle about her successful appeal hearing against the NMC. We talk about NMC accountability and how frustrating it can be to deal with them. We also talk about the challenges she faced during her case and the support she got from her legal team, the RCN, as well as NMCWatch. And then finally, we talk more broadly about process itself and accountability changes that are needed at the NMC. Again, if you have any comments about either Laura's case, your own case, or just want to speak to somebody, please get in touch with us via our website, which is www.nmcwatch.org.uk. You can also find us on most social media platforms, and the links are in our website.
And then when it came back and it was like, you're suspended for 6 months, I was just like, are you actually joking? Like,
Did it feel like what you heard in the hearing didn't match what the panel...
Absolutely. I was like, did they even sit in the same hearing as us? That's what I said to my barrister. Were they even in the same hearing as what we heard? Like, part of it was like, there was no evidence of the witnesses lying. It was like, but one of them blatantly committed perjury in front of them. That was pointed out by the NMC's own solicitor. She actually committed a criminal offence in front of you here, and you've just ignored that. No evidence of collusion, but yet they were admitting they were meeting up and writing their witness statements together, and they were just like, no, there's no evidence of collusion.
I mean, I think you said one of the nurses is under investigation now by the NMC, but the other three, what's happened to them?
So basically, the main nurse who committed the perjury is under investigation.
Right.
The second one, who had the truculent kick-off on the stand, is actually no longer a nurse anymore. She's retired.
Okay. Well,
so, yeah, because of how long it's taken to deal with it. There's another nurse who she changed her evidence on the stand to support me and stated how she kind of got dragged into it. She was truthful on the stand, and said the behaviour of these nurses caused it was. She said even if she hadn't been a part of it, they were going to do it anyway because that's the behaviour they were. It was about power for them, and ultimately they all had their own goals, which was to have me removed. She brought all this up on the stand. The NMC decided to go with her original statement.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So
even hearing that on the stand, they still decided to go with the statement.
They said like one of them, one of the panel like spoke to her and said, if you had the opportunity again now, would you have done this complaint? And she went, no, absolutely not.
Okay.
She said because it didn't achieve what they thought it was going to achieve, which was ultimately one of them getting my job, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
and the judge obviously saw this. What did
absolutely he say? So he commented on like how the evidence was given by this nurse and how can it have been ignored when it was quite clear that also supported me. And he pointed out how the evidence that was supporting me was kind of being ignored. So for instance, the paramedic was apparently witness to this incident with this young man that I was dealing with, where I was shouting and screaming at him in the treatment room. And he was like, that never happened at all. I was present and that didn't happen. And the NMC decided that did happen because he could hear me in the kitchen, which was probably about 10 steps from the treatment room. And the doors were always kept open, and it was an echoey room. We were talking and chatting, but I didn't need to shout. He'd come for his medication. We were laughing and joking. I had a really good relationship with this guy, this young lad who, you know, I'm talking 6'3" lad who would come in, who was homesick and cry on me because I would give him a hug, you know, because we had such a good relationship, but he was deemed a problem pupil because he had ADHD and everything else, whereas I was like, he's just a bit out there, but he's all right. And he just needs a bit of focus, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
But they just saw him as a problem pupil, mainly because one of the nurses, her son was in the same class as him, so she saw it as he was disrupting her son.
Right. Okay.
In class. So there was a lot of background behind things, but then they basically turned around and said my friend who was a paramedic had lied. Like the NMC said the doors were open, he did hear it and everything else. And he was like, he was seething when he saw that, because he was like, I'm HCPC registered. How dare you say that I have lied? I'm not being called into question here about my honesty and integrity, and you've just made an assumption that I've lied. Yeah. So he wrote formal complaints to the NMC, who've just ignored everything. They've just brushed it under the carpet and ignored it. He was like, and he even on the stand, he said, if Laura had done that in front of me, even though I know her, I had a professional responsibility to have reported her immediately to safeguarding, and I absolutely would have done that, because that's my professional stance of where I needed to protect myself. He went, but that just didn't happen. But the panel decided it did, and I was found guilty on it. And he was like, he just couldn't believe it.
Bizarre, isn't it? It's very bizarre.
And he came to London. He came to the appeal at London, and even apparently when the judge picked up on it, it was like, how do you come to that conclusion that the doors were open when you've not actually asked anybody if the doors were open or closed? And the NMC barrister was like, I'm not sure. He was like, you can't just make that assumption. So were the doors open or were they closed? So he was like, kept repeating to her, were they open? And my friend was in the back going, they were open, they were open, they were open. And he was like, and apparently the judge kept looking at him, and then he was going, oh, were they closed? And he was like, no, they weren't closed. Like, and he's going, were they? To the barrister, and she was like, I'm sorry, I wasn't present, my learned friend might be able to help me here. And she was like going, the doors were open. And it was all this
a mockery of the whole
absolutely thing. And you just think, wait a minute, you haven't even got the correct processes to support the even charges together. Like even on balance of probability, you've got to have some evidence, and there was actually no evidence. It was like them just saying, because she did that. And it was like, but you've just spent the majority of the hearing lying. But I did it, so I've done it, because that's what the panel decided. And it's like, to be a regulator, you're in such a privileged position.
Absolutely.
But it is just an abuse of the process of what is going, because you're not learning from this process. I'll be honest, part of me is just really bitter and twisted with the NMC. Part of me was like, do I even want my PIN back? Because do I want to be regulated by these people again and still have them in my life after what they've put me through for the last 6 years and 10 months? Or, but then it's like, I love my job.
Yeah.
That's what do you do as a nurse? You love your job. It's, I'll be honest.
How hard has it been, Laura? How tough has it been for you?
It's been horrific.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm a very experienced nurse with a lot of knowledge. I was incredibly fortunate to being under investigation. I had no restrictions on my practice, and I secured a job in a children's hospice, which luckily I had a friend who worked at, and who was the manager there, who said, I can get you on here. Now, realistically, would I have got a job under investigation? Probably not. Yeah. But I went there as a band 5. I should have been a band 7. I was basically doing the work of a coordinator on a band 5 pay, but couldn't say anything because that's what I had to do. I was only allowed to work part-time for the first year because obviously the trustees had to believe, and they were like very wary about me working with them. And after a year I was allowed to go full-time. And it was like, by the time I was full-time at night, I'd be in charge running the hospice on my own on a band 5 pay, because I ain't getting promoted while I'm under investigation. Nobody's getting promoted in that. I've just got to be thankful I've got a job and I'm nursing. And that is literally what I had to do. But then October of 23, they got a new board of trustees did the hospice, and they basically sat me down with mutual decision and saying, we don't feel we can support you any further. You've got another hearing coming up, and is that going to be the end of it? And if it hits the press, it is, and it doesn't go your way, we've got to protect the hospice. We rely on donations. And it was like, we need to, unfortunately, we need to find a way through this. So the agreement was I left. If it went my way, that I could go back. If it didn't, obviously, it was that side of it, which was really devastating, especially when you've worked and there've been no problems with you throughout that time, and you'd worked to the best of your ability, you built really good relationships up with people, and then all of a sudden a new board of trustees come in and were like, yeah, we can't support you in this. And it was like, wow, okay. But and I think like we can all like relate to when the email drops through. I was really lucky because it only actually happened to me once, but then that fear and can't open egress and all that, and it was always on a Friday. It was a Friday afternoon. You can't get hold of anybody, nobody's answering the phone, you've got to go a weekend with it, and I just wanted to be sick and just curl up in a ball and die ultimately. And just, is this sordid damn disease now dropped on me? I don't know. And then I had an amazing solicitor to start with at the RCN who basically said, this is going to stop. You're not getting any of these emails anymore. I'm not putting you through this. And if it wasn't for her fighting from the outset, I don't think I would have got as represented as well as what I did. Because she was the one who was going, you were just in the middle of a witch's coven here. Like, that's what happened to you. Like, they're awful, these women. And it was like, she saw it for what it was immediately. But then she ended up, after about 3 years, she got promoted. So she ended up actually losing any caseload that she had. She managed to keep me for a bit longer. But right at the beginning, she said to me, it will go to hearing this, I can tell you now, but I am going to get you the best barrister I know. And that's where Megan came into it, who was incredible. Like, she knows her stuff. She was, all over it. And I've said to her many times, in another lifetime, we would have been really good friends. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but it was like, she absolutely fought tooth and nail, and she discovered any possible angle. And I'd be like messaging her going, I've thought about this, what about this? And she'd be like either grounding me and dragging me back in, or it'd be like, oh, it's a really good angle. Like I said to her about when I was saying about the third party, writing in third party, and she was like, where is this? And I was like, it's in the notes. And she was like, where? Because I've not read this. That's when we realized she'd not been given the full information from the NMC. So then I had the original document that I had been given by the school. So it was in the original document. Half of that she hadn't even received from the NMC.
So they withheld information.
Absolutely. So then she went back to him, and obviously we got that introduced into evidence. The NMC weren't, from what I could gather, weren't very keen on it initially. And she was like, well, this is pertinent to the case because it shows that they have colluded and they haven't written their own statements, because why would she write about herself in third party? And
And this is something that we battle with quite frequently. And
exactly.
the say is frequently, no, that doesn't happen, but it does. They will only present information to the panel that will benefit the case.
Absolutely.
Yeah, up to the other party to then question that, but there's still a negotiation to try and allow it in. I can't remember which appeal case it was, but there was one judge in the appeal cases we've looked at over the last 10 years that have won. And they said, you cannot be cherry picking the information that you put
Absolutely.
in front of the panel. You have to put all the information in front of the panel, and then they can decide themselves.
So they withheld my independent investigation that was done by the school.
Yeah. Crazy.
Which basically said what these nurses were about, and that actually it wasn't me.
But the fact is that they had that report, and so early on in your case, they could have either shut your case down or disregarded that part of it and focused on if there was other professional misconduct issues that they felt still needed addressing. So, but they chose not to. They chose to ignore that independent report and still pursue, which is quite terrifying, really.
It is. And so this is a conversation I had with my barrister. I said, at no point did I ever think I was ever going to get a no case to answer, because the case had gone on way too long.
Yeah.
A lot of money's been spent on this, and a lot of time, effort, whatever. There was, that's me might be being very cynical, but actually, let's be realistic. We have to be realistic and justify why we've done this. We have to do something with it. Now, if I'd still been working in the hospice, would I have got a 6-month suspension? I don't know.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know. But I was not in the hospice because I'd left in the October. The hearing was in the January. She's not working as a nurse. We'll give her a 6-month suspension. But ultimately, that lost me my job in the police.
Yeah.
And then
the reason it had come to that was it had taken so long. What, 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years. It was at that point, it was just under 6 years.
Yeah.
And then that was in the January, appeal was in the November.
And it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? I mean, if you didn't have RCN support, if you didn't have a husband with you that was able to financially support you and psychologically support you, if you didn't have your hands on the original investigation report, all those things, it would have been, you could have been struck off. It would have been
absolutely. And the High Court judge did say that in my hearing. He was very clear about, celebrating the fact that RCN had supported this appeal. And he also made it very clear that if I hadn't had RCN support, the chances of me probably winning this cases were very next to nothing. And it just shows the importance of where, I think I was the 40th case the RCN have only supported to High Court. And we've got thousands of people who are in this situation. So it's like, but is that because
other appeals haven't been taken to the High Court doesn't mean that the judgments were right.
Exactly.
It means that they can't guarantee that they would be.
That's it. Or is that down to the fact that they just want to cut the losses because there's a lot, I dread to think how much my case has cost. Like realistically, in terms, I know you've come up with figures on the hearing and everything, but the work that's been done leading up to that, I won't be surprised if my case is like at least £500,000 in legal fees, easy.
At least.
And
that's ultimately registrants' fees that have paid for that.
Exactly. And I said to my barrister, I was like, one thing's for sure, if I ever get back on the register, they're never going to be able to recoup any money off me, which near enough offsets what I've cost them. But it just
the judge awarded costs, didn't he? So he
to the RCN.
Yeah.
Which I was like, why didn't you claim from the beginning? Everything. I don't know. The RCN, I think, need to have a look at how they claim costs in High Court. I think
I think it's I mean, I might be wrong, but I was under the impression that you can only claim for costs to prepare for that appeal. You
Right.
can't claim for, you certainly can't claim for loss of earnings, and you can't claim for work you've done leading up to the hearing. So it is solely for that appeal.
Right. Okay.
And also the thing that always grinds me is that obviously the NMC, I think or the other party can claim, I think it's £190 per hour for the barrister, and they'll allocate two legals, not barristers, but legals, for that appeal preparation. And yet particularly if you're a litigant in person, can only claim £19 an hour, because that seemed, I guess, how they seem comparable to salaries, which is kind of, I mean, I know I was certainly on probably 65k a year when I had my appeal. That would not, I mean, I didn't get awarded costs, but it just seems very, very unfair, and another kick in the teeth that you can't claim the same
Absolutely.
amount back, and you can't have any reimbursement for the
That's
sanction.
it. Like I would, my job at Stonius was I got housing and everything as part of my job.
Yeah.
It was probably they estimated it to be about 60,000 a year, my wage. Like I didn't have bills, I didn't even pay for food. I didn't need to pay for food. We just went to the ref and got fed if we wanted to. It was like a community. You just lived in it. And it was just all of a sudden I had no job, no money, and we had to get a house like now. Like we had to, it was like that kind of situation. And
You look back now and think, how on earth did I get through that?
yeah, absolutely. I just look and just even the mental side of it, I genuinely don't know how, like, I'll be honest, for about 6 months, I don't even know how I existed. Like, thank God of mental health services. Like, I'm still open to mental health services to this day. I've had to, it's everything I've had to go through, the scrutiny when I got pregnant of like social services being involved. I had to have a mental health midwife. I had to be open to services. Perinatal mental health team were involved with me. It was like, if you aren't, if you're not well, you'll be going into residential care with your child. And this, like, my little boy was several rounds of IVF to get him. He was the most precious thing. And I'm never going to go through that experience again of having a child. And they tainted that. Like the NMC tainted that whole experience because they made my mental health like that, not the other way around. And then I was like being looked at by all these professionals because they were aware of the allegations that had been made against me. And could I be trusted around a child at this point? And it, to be analysed by people coming into your house into what's supposed to be the most precious and special time of your life, and wondering, are they going to see something and take your child off you? Because that was part of, I had to, this is what we were going through. And, so it was that worry as well that I was, and then it came to the hearing, and it was like hearing in person that they were demanding from me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to leave my baby. And I was just like on the phone to my solicitor going, I can't leave my baby. I can't leave my baby. And she was just like, you're not leaving your baby. Don't worry. You are not leaving your baby. And I'm like, but they want it. I've got to go in person for 2 weeks. And she's going, no, this is online. Do not worry about it. You are online. And I was going, are you sure? Are you sure? And she was like, I said, will that go against me? And she was like, no, it's going to be online and they'll have to come through me. So, and I was like, okay, that's okay, which wasn't a lot better, obviously, for obvious reasons. But it was all this fear and
Yes.
up and down this, and
it's not just dealing with what's in front of you. You've
no.
got power behind you. That's if again, people say to us, should I respond by this date to the NMC? Because if I don't, will I upset them? You know, will it go against me? And this whole sort of Stockholm syndrome, isn't it, of thinking you've got to behave in a certain way because otherwise that will go against you, which I'm not sure where that comes from, but it must come from somewhere, you know. Or certainly I don't think the NMC do enough to avoid that happening. You know, and whether it's deliberate or not, I'd like to believe it isn't deliberate, but I think they should start recognizing that that is how they come across and that is how it manifests itself, whether it's because we're a unique group of professionals and when we're put under the spotlight like this, it's even more difficult for us. I don't know. We'd need sort of more time and more psychologists to unpick that for I think, but there is, you know, they do have a responsibility here, and it's that long-term impact as well, which, you know, thankfully you won your appeal, which is phenomenal. And you know, that's incredible, and it means you can go back to work if you want to, etc., etc. But you'll still be having to cope with the after effects of this.
That's it. It's like so I was actually in the process of all this diagnosed with autism as well, so it's answered a lot of understandings of thought processes, but then it's trying to regulate them thought processes, and all the hype of all this has been quite phenomenal, really. Like, you know, the responses I've had from the group is just incredible. A lot of people have wanting stuff from me, and I completely understand why, because they're like, want to pick my brain because they've got their cases pending literally on the horizon, and they want that information because they feel like I can help them. And I look at their cases and I think my case can help them and what I've gone through, but I'm also very aware that I need to be careful with how I process everything now. Like, people are going, you need to go to the press, you need to go this, and I'm very shut down about that side of things. But as I went to see my MP on Saturday, and that is the way I want to take this through. It needs to go through. Government have to make the changes here. This, you know, they need to be the ones being that pressure over the NMC's shoulder of like, you cannot act and behave like this. You have abused your position. You haven't got absolute privilege. It's now being removed from you and maybe being outsourced to an external agency temporarily. You can still do the regulation side and everything else, but you clearly can't be trusted with this side of it. So until you can fix that side of it, very much like the GMC went through, they had a big revamp and looked at how they were doing fitness to practice and things like that, you know. And like my cousin's a barrister, and she sits on fitness practice for the GMC, and she's followed my case with me with this and just been absolutely outraged that this is even, how could they even follow that process? And she's like, that would never have happened with the GMC.
Okay.
She said straight up, the GMC would never, this wouldn't have happened. It'd be like, why are these nurses acting like this? Why are they doing this? Why have they said this? When we've got information that clearly contradicts this, we accept that this information's here, but we have to analyse it very carefully. And like the judge said, you know, the balance of probabilities, maybe we need to discard that. And that's how she told me way before my High Court hearing what needed to happen. But she can't believe the NMC are allowed to practice the way
again, and it just baffles me that they're obviously not learning from these judges, because you know, another judge, can't remember if it was in Thornycroft case or one of the others, said, you know, when you're looking at removing somebody's career and, you know, and taking that away from them potentially forever, you can't, you know, you can't only rely on the balance of probabilities. You've got to go nearer the beyond reasonable doubt, because the impact of your decision making is massive.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's gonna affect somebody's life forever. So you've got to be absolutely sure before you make that final decision.
That's it. And this is where my MP, I was talking to him on Saturday and I went, you know, I've been qualified over 20 years.
Yep.
like how much has been invested in me as a nurse over my lifetime. I said, and they wanted to prevent that skills, knowledge, and experience being passed on to the next generation in the middle of a health crisis where we haven't got enough nurses and staff to actually even work. And yet they're just happy to write me off, like just like that, and exert power over me that didn't even, the fact it was so untrue was unbelievable. But that I'm just a rep. It's like I said to him, I was like, I'm just one person. There's thousands of people this is happening to. My case mirrors multiple cases. Like, they don't want to talk as an individual, but this is not an individual case ultimately. Do I think changes are going to happen on the back of it with the NMC? No. I don't think the NMC will learn from it. My barrister messaged and said that apparently it's been changed on guidance with the NMC of how they evaluate cases now.
It shouldn't be guidance.
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
Rules and processes.
Exactly.
If we failed in this way in our patient care, we would expect to be in front of the NMC in sanctions.
Exactly.
So why is it guidance? Why
exactly? We should be being changed. Yeah. This is where, like, there was a girl in our group the other day I was talking, and her case absolutely very much is very similar to mine. And she's just been, I think she's got suspended as well. Somebody else I was talking to, he's been suspended. And it was like, wait a minute, what are they learning from this? Because she was on Friday, I think Thursday or Friday. Yep. Right, my case was 2 weeks ago. The NMC absolutely know about my case now. I'm absolutely aware that they know about it. But yeah, we'll just ignore the mirror imaging here.
So what do you think has to happen? In order to get the change that we need, what do you think has to happen?
I think the idea of what my MP was saying, getting all the MPs around the table, because he said if everybody's received a letter, they should be around that table with me, and we should be discussing this because there's too many people involved. Like I kept saying to him, I'm like, this is the post office scandal again, abusing of the, they've abused their absolute privilege. That's what the post office did, everything else. And he's just going like, you could see him, he was just going, I know, but like, let's put that to one side and like, let's go through the other realms. And he was like, I will get some ministers there. He said, because that's what needs to happen as well. He said, and then see where we go from there. But then it's like, yeah, but what if it just ends at that meeting? It cannot just end at that meeting. He went, there's too many people involved here. It can't end at that meeting. So, and he was the one who was suggesting, we were talking about, removing the power. He said, we're open to anything. He went, we shut down NHS England this week. So he said, we are at a point where we can look at these things and we will act if we need to act. He says, and that's what needs to be looked at. He says, and if you're telling me you've got repeated investigations which, have this, site of where they're not acting, then actually maybe we need to pull them into line and make them act. And it's like, does that mean we have to take over? Then maybe we have to take over. He said, there's so many options available to us. He said, but we just need to get everything together to start with. He said, because if you've got an MP at one end of the country and another at another, they're just going to write a letter and then that's about it.
Exactly. And it's everything in isolation, isn't it?
Exactly. He said, but if you've all of a sudden got 20 MPs around the table and a couple of ministers, he says, that changed the dynamic of it all. It all changes at that point. And for me, and he's like, and we'll come down to Parliament, get a group together. He's like, come down, we'll get this, we'll sit down. They need to hear from you. They need to understand. Like he said, he was just like, I can't even believe this has happened to you. He's like, and that's the one thing I'm getting off everybody. It's like, did this actually happen to you? And it's like, yeah, it did. Yeah. And we have to make the change now. This,
affecting people now, isn't it? I mean, they've been talking about regulatory reform for the last 6 years. There's been various, all the different things that are going on within the NMC at the moment. But meanwhile, we've got, patients not being protected properly.
Absolutely.
Because we've got people who, we know, as your case an example, that there's other nurses out there that are not practicing as they should be, and they're not being scrutinized. And then we've got other nurses that are being put through, scenarios that they really shouldn't be put through, or could be dealt with in a better way that enables them to continue working and learn as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like me personally, I'd like to see the NMC be stripped of the absolute privilege, Privy Council holding them to account properly. I think it's a position they need to earn rather than just be given because they're a regulator and expected to be doing it properly when they clearly aren't, because they're affecting too many lives. They're costing people's lives. Yeah. We know people are taking their own lives over this, and there's many of us who can relate and say, I could have been one of them statistics as well, quite easily. And this is where this shouldn't be allowed to happen. Nazir Afzal, he said, when he was the chief prosecutor, he had probably tested up to about 1 million cases. He said, and in that time, he had 1 to 2 people who committed suicide in that time. To have as many as what we have in such a short period of time, and with a lot less cases, that seriously needs addressing. And these are the points that I think are being missed, because it's like, we're restructuring, we're getting new people in, and on the back of Nazir's report, we're now doing this, but actually nobody's looking at the registrants and what they're going through. It's like, we're doing all this, but we're not actually dealing with this. And it's like, we've got this external law firm who are going to deal with a few extra cases and everything else, but we've still got people who've been waiting 5 years.
Yeah, and the process of doing that is fundamentally flawed.
And are them those who've been on waiting for 5 years, are they going to get no case to answer because it's been going on as long as it has and it's cost a lot of money? Yeah. So we're still in this circle of where it needs to change. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, finally, just to sort of bring it back to the here and now, I mean, what would your message be to anybody going through fitness to practice at the moment or facing it? What would you say to them?
It's a horrible, evil, daunting process. Use the group for support, because there's been many a dark times I've been on there, and just reaching out, people can offer advice, that support, because it's such a safe place. It's that's the best thing about it. But get the help you need when you are feeling like that. It's so important to do that, because you mean something to somebody. You're not that pin. Even though that's like ingrained in us as a nurse, where I was known as Laura the nurse to everybody, and then all of a sudden I'm not a nurse. It's like, and I'm saying to some people, I'm not a nurse. It's like, I was a nurse, I'm not a nurse. It was all that. I've never known anything different since I was 16. It was like, it's just such a horrific experience. And understand that this isn't necessarily a fair process, but make sure you get every scrap of evidence you could get. Like, I couldn't get access to my case notes, for example. I lost that day that dropped on me. I lost access to everything. Try and write everything you can remember down immediately. Like, trying to write everything. Like that first 6 months with my friend, who I was literally going to his for like an hour, 2 hours, and we were going through each thing, and he was like, right, tell me what you were saying. So I'd tell him, being really upset, he'd document everything down, and that probably saved a lot of court. That really did help. But also, like, you are more than that pin. Yeah. You are absolutely more than that pin. And that's easier for me to say now I've got mine back. but do not shy from the fight either, because that's what they want. They want you to back down and give up and go, and they can go, well, see, it must have been true, kind of thing. If you've got that option for appeal, take that appeal, because that's the only way this is going to keep changing. When they keep getting hammered with appeal after appeal after appeal, use my case, use it for your support in your cases, because I guarantee there's elements in my case that it will go right across the board for a lot of people. And I was facing that. This is impossible. We don't know if you're going to win it. We don't know. And then it came out like, I don't know. That was 99.9% chance at like a win against the NMC. Like, they got spanked in a high court. Like, that's the only way I can, my barrister, when she was reading it out to me, she was like, I was absolutely sobbing. She was just like, this isn't just a win, this is just like a landmark win. You've like,
yeah.
And it's only now, if we're thinking philosophically, like, I was clearly put on this journey to support others, kind of thing, and this had to happen to me because my case was clearly one that could make that change. And I'm very aware of the responsibility I've got with this case now. And I'm very aware that I have to make a change with this case. I could easily just slip under a rock and ignore it, but no, I'm not going to do that because
we're really very grateful, Laura. But ultimately you must, like you said before, you have to heal yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel fighting sometimes.
Yes, no, I think that. But I think, again, because we're carers and we always put other people first.
Yeah.
And with this as well, I was the same. That's why I set the group up.
Absolutely.
But then I think, well, I wouldn't have met people like yourself if I hadn't, and that meant that I had to have gone through the NMC process. So thank you very much, NMC.
Yeah. It's like there's a little secret entity going on behind it all, isn't it?
But yeah, you must, take your time. And I think you're very wise when you say about how you're going to move forward next. Take your time to think about how you're going to move next.
Like, I do think the government route is the best way. I genuinely, because that's the only way we can instigate change.
Absolutely.
And I just think, if people are still standing by the NMC when they see a report like that from a high court, they've got to seriously take a look in the mirror and think about, are they really doing the right thing themselves in that job role as well? So that's the other side of it, because that should never have happened in a million years.
Obviously, with me seeing Paul Rees on Friday or meeting him online, what would the one thing you'd like me to say to him on Friday about all of this? Light.
Clear it all out and start again. Take the advice of other regulators that might be offering that advice. Personally, if we're in a position to sue the NMC, I think that's the only way they would actually learn, if they had to start paying out people. But he's only come in, he's only interim. Is he really there for the long haul? The NMC just seems very patchworky with people. You had your David Warrens and that, who've been there since the beginning of time, but then you've got, it's such a transient
workforce,
like everything. Like, you've got one case manager one week, and then next week you've got someone else, and then week after you've got someone else, and it just seems broken from the bottom up. It's just all broken. The whole thing's broken. And does it need shutting down and starting again and rebuilding? To make it safe, to make it fair? The NMC have got a long, hard look in the mirror they need to be having with themselves, and seriously considering, are they the right people to be
able to do it?
Yeah. That's it. And it's like, we saw it when it was UKCC and then it transformed into the NMC because, you know, that had got to the end of the road with a lot of things. Is that what needs to happen now with the NMC? But instead of just changing the name above the door, actually make that change.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know is the answer, but
we just need to keep talking and keep telling people, and
absolutely. And we just need that pressure from above on them. Yes. So like the government pressure, it's like, you know, where they're having monthly meetings and having to explain their behavior, like to a panel, for instance, themselves, you know. I don't know, hopefully.
Well, thank you so much. And
all right.
Talk to you for hours, but it's fantastic. And thank you for being brave enough to speak to us. And
no, that's fine.
You keep going.
Yeah, we keep going. We will keep going. All right. Take care, Cathryn.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to our podcast with Laura. If you missed part 1, please have a listen to that too. And if you have any thoughts or comments about the podcast, then please get in touch via our website, www.nmcwatch.org.uk. You can also contact us about any fitness to practice issues and find all sorts of information about what we do there. Thanks for listening.